You know, people say betrayal hurts most when it comes from the ones you love. They're right. Because the day my own son left me stranded in a foreign country was the day I stopped being his mother and became something else entirely. He thought he'd abandoned me, but what he really did was create the strongest version of me. My name is Eli, and if you're watching this, you might think what happened to me sounds like a movie. I used to think so too until I lived it. It all started the day my only son, Daniel, and his wife Claire left me stranded on a remote road in Northern Ireland. "Come on, Mum," Claire had said with that fake smile she always used when she was about to do something cruel. "Let's see how strong you really are without us." Then the car door slammed, and the sound of tires spitting gravel was the last thing I heard before silence. The wind smelled of salt and rain. The cliffs stretched for miles, sharp as broken glass against the sea. I stood there with my suitcase and my shock, 68 years old, abandoned by the one person I thought would never hurt me. If you'd told me that morning I'd end the day alone in a village smaller than a city block, I'd have laughed. But life has a dark sense of humor. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had called me out of nowhere. "Mum, we're heading to Ireland for a business retreat," he'd said cheerfully. "Why don't you come? We'll turn it into a little family holiday." I should have known something was off. Daniel hadn't invited me anywhere since Claire came into the picture. She was the type who treated kindness like a transaction, something she only offered when she wanted something in return. But I wanted to believe my son was reaching out. So, like the fool I was, I packed my best clothes, booked my flight, and told my friends I was finally going on the trip of a lifetime. It was supposed to be beautiful. It was supposed to be healing. Instead, it became the story of how I rebuilt my entire life from the ashes. The trouble started right at the airport. Claire eyed my neatly pressed blazer and said, "Mum, you look like you're about to lecture a boardroom." Daniel laughed. "Relax. She's just being herself." They didn't know that behind my polite smile I was already questioning why I'd come, but I told myself this was my chance. Maybe we could fix what had been broken for years. Except, for 3 days, I wasn't part of their family. I was their unpaid babysitter, tour guide, and walking wallet. I paid for their meals, their upgrades, their souvenirs. They told me they'd booked separate rooms for privacy. I pretended it was fine. When Daniel said he wanted to show me the countryside, I thought maybe, finally, this was his way of spending time with me. But that drive into the misty hills ended differently. Claire's voice still echoes in my head. "You make everything about you, Eleanor, even now. We're tired of your drama. You've been our responsibility for too long." And then, just like that, they were gone. The sound of the car fading into nothing. I stood by the roadside until the cold crept into my bones. Then, for the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I picked up my suitcase and walked. The nearest sign said, Dunhaven. Population? Maybe 30, on a good day. Half the cottages looked abandoned, and the only light came from a pub with a crooked sign, the Shepherd's Rest. I hesitated at the door. What could I even say? "Excuse me, my son just discarded me like an unwanted pet. May I use your phone?" But standing in the wind felt worse, so I stepped inside. The room went silent. Every head turned. Then, from behind the bar, a woman with silver hair and kind but sharp eyes spoke. "You look like you've been through hell. Come sit. I'm Maeve." And that's how I met the woman who would change my life. Over a pot of tea strong enough to wake the dead, I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said one thing. "Then your son's a fool. But you're here now, and that means you've got a chance to start over." She offered me a small room upstairs, €20 a night, breakfast included. I could afford a week. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I'd gone from mother to burden. But under all that pain, a spark flickered. Anger. And somewhere beneath the anger, resolve. The next morning, Maeve handed me coffee and said, "Get dressed. I want to show you something." We walked through the mist to an old stone barn behind the pub. She unlocked it with a heavy iron key. Inside was chaos, a hoarder's paradise of antiques, paintings, old trunks, books, porcelain. "My husband collected these," she said. He passed 5 years ago. I always meant to sort it out, but I brushed dust off a carved oak chest. These are valuable, I whispered. She smiled. Thought so. You used to work in a museum, didn't you? I blinked. I had. Decades ago, before marriage, before Daniel. She remembered. Help me catalog them, she said. We'll sell what's worth selling. 50-50 split. I stared at her. You don't even know me. I know enough, she said, and just like that, I wasn't useless anymore. The following weeks were a blur of discovery. The barn became our project, our battlefield, our redemption. We unearthed silver goblets, 18th century books, forgotten heirlooms. Then one day, under a dusty cloth, we found it. A small painting, delicate and vivid, signed by an artist whose works hung in national galleries. We took it to Dublin to be authenticated. The appraiser adjusted his glasses, examined it, and looked up. It's genuine, he said. Early work. Could fetch 20,000, maybe more. My knees nearly gave out, but then he frowned. There's something else. This piece was reported missing from an estate decades ago. My stomach dropped. You mean stolen? Not necessarily. Possibly sold quietly to cover debts, but it'll need proof of ownership. That night, Maeve and I pored over old ledgers. Among the yellowed pages, I found a name that froze my breath. E. Pierce. My own surname. The painting wasn't stolen. It had been part of my family's estate generations ago, brought overseas and forgotten. Days later, a letter arrived for me. The sender? A man named Declan Pierce, a retired historian who claimed to be my distant cousin. He'd heard of my inquiry. When we met, he brought documents proving our connection. Your great-grandmother Eleanor left Ireland for America in 1919, he said. She took a few heirlooms with her. Some stayed behind. That painting was hers. I held the papers in trembling hands. So it's mine? Legally and rightfully. That was the day I stopped being the woman who'd been left behind and became the woman who reclaimed everything. The auction was surreal. The painting sold for £46,000. Within months, we sold other restored pieces. My account grew, but more importantly, so did my confidence. Maeve and I turned the barn into Pierce and Doyle Antiques, a real business. I was alive again. Then one morning, my phone rang. Daniel. After 7 months of silence. Mum, he said softly, I've been trying to reach you. We saw a news article about your antique shop. I'm proud of you. His tone dripped with something I recognized too well, greed disguised as affection. You and Claire should come visit, I said evenly. We've built quite the collection. They arrived a week later with their kids in tow. Claire smiled too much. Daniel's eyes darted around the showroom like a wolf sizing up prey. This is impressive, he said. You've done all this? With a partner, I replied. Maeve shook their hands, polite but cold. Claire lingered near a display case. These pieces must be worth a fortune. Some are priceless, I said, watching her reflection in the glass. For hours, they acted like family asked about my health, my plans, my future. Then Daniel said it. Mum, you shouldn't have to work so hard. Why don't we help you manage things? We could handle the sales online, the finances, the marketing. The old me might have cried with joy at the offer, but the new me saw the trap immediately. I smiled. That's a wonderful idea, I said. Why don't we talk over dinner? That night, as we sat at a local inn, they were perfect, polite, charming, and lying through their teeth. Claire even apologized. I was awful to you, she said tearfully. We were stressed, and what we did was unforgivable. I wanted to believe her. I almost did. Until, back at the inn later, I stepped outside for air and heard them. She's buying it, Claire hissed. Once she transfers the funds, we're done here. You're sure? Daniel asked. She's older now. Easier to manipulate. I froze. My own son, my blood, plotting to steal from me again. I called Maeve. They're trying it again, I said. Good, she replied calmly. Let's make sure they fail spectacularly. The plan was simple. Let them think they were winning. We'd create fake sale documents and accounts, make them believe they were transferring my funds safely back to the US, when in fact, everything they touched would go straight to the authorities monitoring the transactions. We worked all night. The next morning, Daniel eagerly agreed to help me set up the transfers. "It's better if I handle it, Mum. Just sign here." I did, calm, steady, the performance of a lifetime. 3 days later, they flew back to America smiling, believing they'd drained me again. 2 mornings after that, the phone rang. "Mum, there's been a mistake," Daniel stammered. "The accounts are frozen. They're investigating fraud." I sipped my coffee. "How unfortunate," I said. "Did the police explain why?" Silence. They think the accounts are fake. That's because they are, darling." You walked right into a sting. "Mum, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You tried to rob me again. But this time, the only thing you stole was your own freedom." He went quiet. I could almost hear his breath shaking. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "You're my mother." "I was," I said. "But you made sure that version of me died on that Irish road." I hung up, and I didn't cry. Not one tear. 6 months later, Pierce and Doyle Antiques was featured in a national magazine. The photo showed me standing proudly beside Maeve, surrounded by restored treasures. 69 years old, finally free, finally powerful. Daniel and Claire divorced soon after the fallout of their failed scheme. I heard he's working for minimum wage now, somewhere in Leeds. I don't wish him harm. I just wish him awareness. Because I learned something he never did. Sometimes, the worst thing someone does to you is the best thing that could ever happen. When they left me on that road, they thought they'd broken me. But they didn't destroy me. They released me. And if you're watching this, feeling trapped, dependent, or betrayed, remember, you are stronger than the people who underestimate you. I was left on a lonely road with nothing. Now I have everything. Revenge didn't rebuild me. I did. And that's a story no one can ever steal again.